I can't start today's discussion without showing what's around me. This beautiful place. Check this out. So, more discussions on self. And today's rambling is about a practical application of being self and how I've done more self-seeking. And it's simply this: to ask yourself, what do you know? And how do you know it? And it seems simple to say that, but how do you know who you are? Well, that's not exactly what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that you can I have found that I have thoughts rumbling around in my consciousness that I don't believe. And people will be like, well, so what? But if you seek self, why waste, mental energy having these things? And I found that it's very interesting asking myself, where did this come from? Why do I believe it? Why is it even there? Well, it's there because I'm permeable and conscientious, and I seek to better myself by knowledge, at least initially. And I think we all are that way, or to some degree. And so many of the things that rumbling around my head were just things I don't believe in, like business things, like you got to work hard to succeed. Well, there's a lot of asterisks to that. Does that mean you don't work hard? Does it mean you're not succeeding? Dude, none of that matters. What would I write? What would I write if it were up to me? What would be my business rules? And I don't want to share them now because it doesn't really matter. The point is, when you seek self, and hopefully you do that in relative isolation, because that's how you accomplish these things. These things rattle around in your head, religious thoughts, political thoughts, business thoughts, and I wonder if the people who originated, the authors of these things, actually believe what they're saying. Like, do they want this on their epitaph? Because the things that I believe and I want to think about are things that I want on my epitaph. Like things that really mattered, and things that I stood up for, and things that were an essential extension of my unique self. And I'm not there yet, but well, one of them would be to seek self. I mean, I think that's the most important currently, and I leave that open for debate. But it's genuine, and I believe it, and I found it on my own, and that's why I think it's very unique. And it's not that others haven't found this too. It's just I really did find this and discover this on my own and believe it on my own. And looking back, I found that there were some psychologists and philosophers who mimic what I'm saying, or I mimic what they're saying, which is great. But I believe it independently. And I hope that whoever's listening to this will find this as well, because it's foundational. And as we were talking before, talking about a tuning fork, like what is your tuning fork? How do you tune your mind? Well, the very concept of tuning can be contentious, but what are your thoughts when no one's telling you what to think? And that's really for you to answer. It's for me to answer. And I think it's very useful. I, as you know, like to come out to nature because I find that this is an excellent tuning fork for me. This is an excellent thought chamber, soul chamber, however you want to say it. Today I was hiking and I was thinking of that excellent story of the death of Arthur, which I loved as a child. And the whole story, Arthur, when he would have his difficulties, he would go to nature and he would talk and he would seek Merlin and the owls and such. And I find solace in that because, that means that others like myself have sought the solitude of nature for a new discovery of something, or discovery of something new, or a rediscovery of something old, however you want to say that. And, it brings up the concept of blankness. Like if the thoughts rumbling around in your head, the philosophies are things that you have studied, and in our culture, we spend literally a third of our life studying what someone else said. Now that's good, but it can also be a distraction, particularly if it doesn't lead you to a greater sense of self. If you spend all this time studying what other people say, what are you going to say? Like after your PhD program, you are required to come up with a dissertation of like, what is your contribution to the academic world or to the world in general? And so I think that also applies in the philosophical sense. And not just to get a PhD or to have a paper or research project where you just, you become rubber stamped as a new doctor, but for yourself. I just don't think this gets said enough. I know this, I'm not exactly giving original thought, but I'm giving genuine thought, at least from my perspective. Because now, this is February 2023, and now there's a great global clash between Russia and Ukraine, and the discussions range, pro, con, this or that. I don't even want to get into details. But the concept of self applies here, that which of these entities will allow people to seek themselves and which will not. And this is my new political mantra. And it's not along well, it is along philosophical lines, but it's not necessarily along religious or socioeconomic or language ties. It's about which of these will allow people to be more themselves. Because ultimately, we need people to seek themselves. We need people to seek themselves so that we can have a more rich and fuller experience ourselves and with other selves who have enriched themselves with the wellspring of their selves. And I find this a unifying theory and very clarifying because I believe it. And I think it's both practical and lofty and esoteric. Because it allows one to believe what you believe and to have, action behind it. Like it is something you bring up in discussion. Because I think so often in political discussions, people get, caught up in the details that aren't necessarily the essence. What's the point if someone is a communist? What's the point if someone's a capitalist? What's the point of someone this or that, or they live in a dictatorship? Well, if the organization that they belong to or they are oppressed by crushes self, well, then that's a net negative. And that's how I see it. And I use these I studied poli-sci in school just like everyone else did, and I don't like to throw labels because it doesn't lead to self. I want the discussion to lead to someone not believing that I'm smart or this or that, but that it helps them become themselves, because I don't want to argue something that isn't self. It's pizza time. It seems so clear out here. But when you're in the world and you're bombarded with all these messages, maybe you're the person doing the bombarding. I don't know. It's like, kind of, what's the point? You know, if you want to talk one political side versus the other, I mean, what's the point? You just, at the end, ultimately, you're either encouraged or discouraged. And, you know, how is that good for all of us? Well, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think to seek self is to seek a greater citizenship, human citizenship, and to share that with others. Hopefully, begin them on the path of their own self-seeking, which will ultimately yield a richer world citizenship. How eventually, you know. Yeah. Anyway, there we go.